Now, last year it was federal Parliament and today it was the New South Wales Parliament thrown into a controversy over bullying, over a toxic culture, over sexual harassment and even sexual assaults. Look, there are some problems with these workplaces that I'll come to in a moment. I've worked in state and federal politics at a senior level, in government and in opposition, and there are issues to be addressed about work culture and practices for sure. But and this is a big but though. We need to be very, very careful about the way we interpret these surveys, because much of the media beat this stuff up to within an inch of its life, and the politicians feel they have to go along lest they look like they don't care. The report talks about 1 in 5 parliamentary workers experiencing sexual harassment, and it details 5 cases of alleged sexual assault or attempted sexual assault.
I've read the report. It is sobering, confronting and completely unacceptable. Every workplace across our state should be safe, free from harassment, from sexual harassment and sexual assault. That is clearly not the case in the New South Wales Parliament. Parliamentarians are leaders and role models in our society. They should lead from the front. Clearly, we have a culture in the New South Wales Parliament that over time has become in many instances toxic and is wrong. If parliamentarians cannot lead and provide an environment where workplaces are safe, what hope do we have for other workplaces across our great state?
Now, this report was conducted by former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick, and it provides some details about those 5 cases of alleged sexual assault or alleged attempted sexual assault. Apparently, the alleged victims were 3 males and 2 women, and it was people with a diverse sexuality who were overrepresented in making these claims. We don't know much more than that, but clearly, if such episodes occurred, then the alleged victims should have gone to the police.
For those particular people that may be reading that report today, you know who you are. And my very strong advice to you is that you do not belong in the Parliament of New South Wales. I ask you to think very long and hard about this. And I ask you to make sure that if this is you that is mentioned, get the help that you need, and please leave the New South Wales Parliament.
Pretty firm stuff there, and rightly so. Now, it should go without saying, but let me make it very clear that any sexual assault or attempted sexual assault in Parliament House is an outrage, and any sexual harassment is clearly unacceptable. The key point here is that assault or attempted assaults should be reported to police, and sexual harassment allegations should at least be reported in the workplace as well. We know this is not always easy, but of course reporting wrongful behaviour is always the way to go. What you need to know about this survey is that it's voluntary and anonymous, and that fewer than 450 people, that's less than 28% of parliamentary workers, responded to the questionnaire, with some face-to-face interviews and written submissions too. And clearly this sample is self-selecting. So just be clear, when we read that 20% of staffers claim to have experienced sexual harassment, the data is really that 20% of just over a quarter of the workforce who responded made that claim. And we don't know the extent or detail of that harassment either. Again, no level of this behaviour is acceptable, but the nature of these voluntary and anonymous surveys is that they clearly have a propensity to drastically overstate the numbers. It was a similar story with the survey in federal Parliament last year. Less than a quarter of the people working in the Canberra Parliament House building responded to that survey. So the percentages were drawn from a self-selecting, anonymous sample of less than 1 in 4 workers. And it's safe to presume those who had experienced problems would be more likely to respond. Now, this is not to downplay the behaviour or lessen the alleged crimes, just to be cautious about the percentages and generalisations that emerge.
This must end. it ends today, and we will work very closely with all sides of politics to implement change.
It's my view that neither side or any side in politics comes to this issue with clean hands. We all need to do better, reach across the aisle and make sure that we're making every possible effort to make the New South Wales Parliament a safe workplace.
So, as I said, there are some problems that I would point out based on these reports and also from my own experience in politics. And the report does talk about widespread bullying and a toxic culture. And it refers to the strange and high-pressure environment of working in Parliament. And sure, we all see every day how politics tends to attract a strange mix. There are those sort of people who are altruistic, and then there are those who are ambitious, those who are keen to serve, and those who are driven by ego and avarice. And sometimes there are strange mixes of those inspirations within individuals. Believe me, you get a similar mix in political staffers. People are drawn into political work sometimes because of their own ambitions or loyalties, or even their personal ambitions as well. So while parliaments face similar work pressures and pitfalls to other workplaces, they are perhaps on steroids. And maybe the most sensible reform they could do to get on top of these issues is to restrict sitting hours to something more sensible, something more normal, something closer to office hours. And while they're at it, keep booze out of the workplace. In other words, bring parliamentary work conditions closer to the norms of other professional employment. The late night sittings with bars and dining rooms at hand means that our politicians and our parliaments are really the relics of a bygone era. It's time to modernise the work practices, which should help to normalise the work standards. And in the meantime, if there have been any crimes committed, then the police need to get involved.